Hello, ladies, dames, and femmes, and welcome to yet another edition of Among Women, a safe space for intergender conversation. Here is where we talk about all things girl and womanhood related. So if you are interested in such, do comment, like, share, and subscribe. In this edition, we will be discussing reproductive choice or reproductive responsibility, which is a follow up to the previous week's video. And previously, we spoke about reproductive abuse as well as coercion. And I realized from that discussion that a lot of people, specifically women or people who identify as feminine, do not actually know or understand that being a parent is something you choose. It's not just something that happens to you. And so this video is a follow-up to that and the conversation of that, like, parenting is a choice. You have a decision in whether or not you decide to bring human beings into the world. And so this week is a follow-up to that. Please do note I have notes as always. If you see me looking down, that's what I'm looking at. So let's start. I did not do research for this video, and by that I don't mean that I'm not informed in the subject. I just mean that I didn't actively do any research that I will be citing anywhere on screen. So please note I didn't do any research. The concept that parenting is a choice, right? The idea that you actually have a choice on whether or not you have children is something I've been thinking about it honestly for a really long time. I've been thinking about it since a very young age. And I realized from thinking about it from such a young age that most people don't, because of the society we are born into, where you're born, you go to creche and preschool, well, like school actually. So you go to school, you if you're fortunate, you go to university or college. If not, you just get a job, if you're fortunate enough to do that, once again. And then you get a job, and then you get married, and then you have kids, and then your kids have kids, and it's that life, and then you die, right? That's life. Because of that cycle and how things just seem to, like, this is just how it goes, most people never actually think about whether or not they want to have kids. Having kids to most people is just something you do. And so being someone who from a young age was already thinking about, is this something I want to do or not, and what does that mean for my life, right? How do I move to ensure that this happens, and it happens kind of like on my terms? I realize that just most people don't think about it. It's not something most people think about. Most people do not think about it. And like, so that for me would be like the first thing we kind of need to like get through, like, is the idea that, like, having children is not just something you do. We don't just bring human beings into the world. It's something we have to take very seriously. And like, bringing a soul forth, as I would say, is not something you take lightly. And I was actually watching a video by a creator, Bobo Machila is her name, and I think it's Bobo's Void. I might link the video.
I want to talk about the decision of having kids in the context of living in bad faith, because I actually don't think it's a decision. I don't think that most people make the decision to have kids. I think that most people are told from birth and conditioned and socialized to believe that it is their duty, either as a woman or as a man, to bring sentient life and father and mother that child. And it's just like you have to build your legacy, and it has your last name. And
that having children is not something most people actually think about, right? And they go into other things that I will not cover in this video, but like the idea that people, like, you don't actually think about. And I think most, like, that is where we need to start, where people realize it's not just something you do, and it should not be just something you do. You should actually, there should be consideration that goes into bringing human beings and souls. And for me, that is such a dangerous thing, because these are literal souls. these are human beings, and the fact that we live in a society that has normalized bringing souls forth as like, oh, it's nothing, like, it's so scary. That is scary. I fear for your children, and I fear for you, like, or at the very least, I'm sorry for you in terms of like, how are you brought up that you think that having a child is just something you do you know? And so that is something I think should just be taken seriously, that like, you don't just have kids. Parenting is a choice, and you choose to bring people into the world, but you also choose to take care of them, right? You choose to be there for them. You choose to stay, and then you choose to be kind in your staying, and nurture them, and care for them. So the second point, again, I have notes, is when choosing. Okay, so for those who do think about it, because I know some of you will be looking at this video and be like, well, I did think about it, you know, and that is why maybe I was already had a job when I had my first child, or that is why I was already married when I had my first child, do you know? So like, great that we are there, and that you were thinking about like whether or not you want to have children, and even in your thinking about that you want children, you made actionable steps to ensure that your child's well-being, like even before they're here, you know, you're already preparing for them. That's amazing, right? And so, but in thinking about that, I do think it's important to think about the co-parents, or the people we choose to have children with. And though I know that a lot of people, even people who maybe had children as children themselves, you think about this more often than not. What we think about, or what is put as the most important thing, is money, which is important, right? So whether or not someone can provide for a child, right? Or does he come from a rich family that will provide for their grandchild, right? Or does yeah, that is what is first provide, is can he provide, or does he come from the kind of family and communal family structure that can provide for this child? Oh, and looks. These are the things that I have heard and seen being prioritized in the conversations I've had with women, and conversations I've seen, you know, both in overheard in my personal life as well as on social media. You know, it's like, do you want your child having that nose? As it is important to care, if that's something that matters to you, that your child will have that nose, right? But some things that I think are very important that we don't talk about is, one, medical history, which most people don't even have their medical history. But like, but the knowing about whether someone's family has a history of diabetes, has a history of high blood pressure, has a history of cancer or any other illnesses, and the idea that, well, is it a type 1 diabetes or type 2, because one is a lifestyle consequence and another is hereditary, is that right? Is important. It is important to know the medical conditions that you as a parent will have to deal with should you choose to have a child with this person. And this is something I don't see being discussed. The idea that you should know someone's medical history, their own as well as their families. And I understand you can't, like, again, most of our families don't really know this, you can't go fully deep dive into it, but there's some like very basic information you can get from just having conversations with people and realizing, wait, your uncle has epilepsy, so that means there's a predisposition in your genetics, in your bloodline, for epilepsy. Do you know? So these are very important things that I feel like should be discussed. Trauma, or what we would call family curses, right? So if, and you know, like, some people may not like this, so they might be like, I don't know, you're gonna have negative like idea, like, but we are Black people. I'm an African, I'm Black and I'm African person, and I am of Xhosa descendant, right? And ancestors are real. Like, say whatever you want to say, like, they're real, right? And so some people are not aware that certain things happened or were done that really far back in your bloodline, right? And they will affect you and your children. So there's a reason why, some people's marriages, are just not lasting. Or some people don't get married, or maybe like the boys in the family get married but the girls in the family don't and are struggling to get married. Like, that's just one example. I'm not saying this to exalt marriage, but it is important for you, when you're choosing to have children with someone and choosing the person you would like to have children with, to know what ancestral trauma or family curses might be in this person's bloodline. And these are questions I, again, do not see being asked, and these are conversations I don't see happening. If they're happening, I am not familiar with them. I'm not in the rooms where these conversations are happening, and I do think this is something that is important, because whether you like it or not, this will affect the human being you are bringing to the world. And I keep saying that because I would like to put an emphasis and have people to understand that your child is a person, right? Your child is not going to be an infant for 1,000 years. That infant is going to grow up into an adult, and the things that affect you as an adult, that affect your partner as an adult, and the adults in their families will affect that person. And so even something like families breaking apart, right? So where families just break apart, and there's like internal friction within the families of like, rakgadi mamang, malome mamang, and things, that is something that will affect your child going forward. And it's things we should be thinking about if you're deciding whether or not you want to have kids, because those things will affect your child going forward. Reproductive responsibility. And next, this is one I might get a lot of flack of. If this entire video is on something I get a lot of flack from, but the idea that your reproduction is your responsibility. It is important for you to take responsibility for whether it is like birth control. Like, before we even get to birth control, for me, I feel like be very selective with the people you choose to engage sexually with. Be very selective with the people you give access to you in a sexual way. We live in a world of hookup culture. We live in a world where people are like, it's just, and people think, oh, it doesn't mean anything, or, oh, we're just friends with benefits. It's a situationship. We live in that culture. And for me, it's like, please, not even like, yeah, I'll say that, right? Could you, for you, not for the people, not from some like purity culture, like, oh, like be classy. No, for your own emotional well-being, for your own spiritual well-being, just to save your own time, right? Because if you weren't spending all of this time in relationships and situationships and hookups that are not going anywhere, you would have time for other things. You would have more time for studying that business you've always wanted to start, for volunteering. I mean, you would have time for so much more if you weren't engaging in that. So for you and your own well-being, be selective with who you let have access to you. Not everyone deserves the right to your company. In fact, no one has the right to your company. So be selective with who you let into your life. And that doesn't include into your bedroom or into your whatever sexual space. I don't know what you want to call it, but it does include that, right? And once you have chosen that, because some people are very good at misrepresenting themselves, and they can pretend to be a certain way, and then once they have you, they switch up on you. Even once you are in a committed relationship, whether it's a long-term relationship or a marriage, you are still responsible for your reproductive health. There are many women who wanted maybe 1 or 2 kids and ended up with 5 because they allowed their significant other and the person they were married to be responsible for their reproductive health. No, you are still responsible for your reproductive health. And if that means being on some kind of contraceptive, if that means cycle tracking, thank you, I'm forgetting, cycle tracking, if that means cycle tracking, if that means and not having sex when you are ovulating, like whatever that means, if that means still using protection even though you are married and you've been married for 3, 4, 5 years and you decide during this period I want to use protection, if that means checking to make sure that there are no holes in the condoms and stuff like that, do that. And this is not to say you don't trust your partner, even though sometimes it is that you don't trust the person you're married to, right? But it's not necessarily to say that you don't trust the person, as it is that you are taking responsibility for your reproductive health. Because at the end of the day, like, even in the absolute best of co-parenting relationships, even in the best of present fathering, right? The bulk of caring for the child is on you as a woman, because even before they're in the world, a baby's already demanding from you, right? Your body goes through so much to bring that person here. So it is your responsibility, if you do not want to have kids or don't want to have kids anymore, to ensure that doesn't happen. You cannot rely on your partner, and I'm sorry to be the person that tells you that, but you can't rely on your partner to care more about your reproductive health and to be more responsible with your reproductive health than you are. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. And then you are so this is for, I know I'm going through this quite quickly, but this is for the people. I'm trying to get the video shorter because last week one was 40 minutes long and I'm like, oh my goodness, who's gonna sit through this? So I'm trying to get them shorter. That's why I'm running through this. And once again, as I stated, I didn't do research for this one, so I'm not referring to notes and stuff. It's just me speaking. So the last bit, well, it's not the last bit, but one thing I do want to say for people who don't have kids, specifically women, because Among Women is for women who do not have kids, the fact that you do not have a child that you had in your body and birthed yourself, the fact that you are not in a relationship with someone who has a child and so you're not a step parent or anything like that, does not mean that you are not an elder. It does not abscond you of responsibility, and does not mean that the way you move does not affect children. You are still an elder. As a 22-year-old hanging around 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, to them you are the older person. You are to them you are the adult. You are what they look up to. So even as someone who does not have kids, right, you are still an elder. You are still responsible for human beings. And as such, it is important that how you model yourself, how you speak about and to people, especially children, bears that in mind. How you treat little kids in the presence of other kids, even if it's not in the presence of other kids, how you treat that child teaches them something about being an adult. Even if it's a niece or a nephew, even if it's your friend's child, how you treat children still has an impact. And so even if you don't have kids of your own, please be aware that not having kids doesn't abscond you from the responsibility of being an adult in the world, and in a world where there are children. You are still an elder. And as an elder, act like it. Again, if you are, because it's gonna sound like I'm talking to 30-year-olds and 50-year-olds and whatever, or not. By the way, 30 is young, but it's gonna sound like I'm talking to much older people, and I want to make it very clear to a 20-year-old, a 19-year-old, a 16-year-old, to a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, you are an adult. they look at you as someone who is older. They have very little distinction between you and a someone who's much older, like a 30-year-old. Maybe they can make a distinction between you and someone who's like 50 or 60, but for the most part, really young children, to them, we're all adults. And so it is important that you remember that and you act in accordance with that when you are in the presence of children, even when you're not. Just be a good human being all around. But like, especially when you're in the presence of children, be aware that your actions and the way you speak and how you handle yourself has an impact on children. And just because they're not your personal children doesn't mean you don't get to care about them. So this video is a bit of a mess. I'll do my best during the editing process, but I'm aware it's a bit of a mess. One, I did, as stated, did not research for this one. I repeat, that's not to say that I'm uninformed on this subject. It just means that I don't have citations that I'm going to put up on screen as well as link below. That's all that means. It does not mean I'm uninformed on this subject. But also in that, I chose to hold back because as I was writing my script and, you know, my notes for this, I was very aware that I did not want this to be a woman shaming episode. I did not want this to be an edition where I'm just like, you know, how dare you have children when you're not, like, to be like this, like a baby mama shaming, or even like mother shame, like mother in terms of women who are married, shaming and trying to be like blaming women for maybe having multiple children, you know, instead of just one or two. Like I was very careful not to do that, and to word it very so it wouldn't sound like that. Even if someone took a clip from this video and like put it somewhere else that is not here, I did my best to word it in a way that it could not be taken out of context. And so this is going to be a very interesting video. I don't know what I'm going to do with the editing, but again, the main message of this video is the idea that you, and this is the point of the channel, babes, this is why Among Women is Among Women, is because it is to empower women. And I feel the greatest way to empower people is actually with information. People, you know, they say when you know better, you do better. And knowing better, like, is, I think, 50% having information, but also another maybe 30% of that is like understanding how that applies to you and your individual life. And then 20% is like actually being willing to do like the change. Like if you have information, if you don't do anything with it, it's not going to change your life. Unfortunately, it won't. So this is why Among Women exists. This is why I'm doing this work, right? To arm a woman with information, yes, but also to show you how these stats and figures and all the research I'm doing actually applies to you on a personal level. And then how do you use that? And like that will be achieved. I was gonna say I hope, but like, no, this is achieved, and that will come through in everything I do with Among Women. So thank you, especially for those who made it all the way to the end. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. You can actually turn the notification button to be notified of when I upload. I will be uploading at 12 o'clock every Wednesday. That is when I will be, yes, every Wednesday. I shouldn't have gone high. Every Wednesday. And in time, I want to do more. I want to do 2 and then move up to 3 videos per week. For now, we are doing 1 video every Wednesday and getting that consistency. There's also a TikTok channel. For those who are watching on TikTok, you're probably not going to see this part, but there is a TikTok as well. It's at Among Women. Everywhere it's Among Women, and I will be linking those below. Thank you so much once again to those who stayed all the way to the end. Look forward to seeing you next week. Mwah.